With season 1 less than an hour away, I thought it was going to be the best time for this video. Hey guys, it's Deconic, and in this one we are going to be going over my season 1 starter build. At this point, you've probably seen the nerfs to vulnerable damage and crit damage, and I'm not gonna lie, they hit minions, they hit summoner builds too, and they hit us hard. And I'll be honest, the additive buffs that we get to compensate, just don't cut it. You just don't. They're not up to the damage we lost, and as such, we are working from a disadvantage of where we were during the preseason. That said, I have come up with a build that seeks to kind of cushion this or even come out with even more damage based on other buffs that were laid out in the patch notes too. So the main goal of this build is to actually maximize our uses of the buffs that we received during the patch notes and minimize the nerfs. Even though there is really no way to minimize the vulnerability and crit nerfs, we are still trying to get as much damage as we can from what we have at our disposal. And this led me to this build, which is a lot more hands-on than my other laid-back starter build, which I'll be dropping a video for soon. But for now, this build is more hands-on, it's more active, but it also produces more damage at its core. How do we produce more damage from our minions and really benefit from like the 5% heal that was buffed for the priest and the extra damage? We are aiming to use the base minions to do more damage, so we can then benefit from the 25% summoning skill damage increase and the skeleton priest damage buff. We use bone mages, which, if you don't know, they do self damage whenever they use attacks. So we have to mitigate this by using the priests to heal for % of their max health to keep them alive, so they maintain this 40% damage buff for as long as we can keep them alive. And with this alongside Bonded in Essence, we essentially have them permanently alive when we remember to use our Skeletal Priest. Now, for the moments where we don't remember to use Skeletal Priest, because it does happen. I mean, we're all humans. There are a couple of things that would happen. They wouldn't just kill over and die because we are trying to get as much life on kill as we can on our gear. So we are going for sights as our two-handed weapon of choice. We are going for life on kill on the chest piece. We are going for life on kill on the helmet. Why life on kill, you may ask? Because minions inherit life on kill, and that means whenever a mob dies, they do get a percentage of the life you would get on kill. So this means they actually still keep themselves alive or sustain themselves a fair bit more than you would expect just because of having these stats. So we really want these stats on our gear pieces. Now, this is a side note, but keep in mind my current stats are not arranged with importance. So like, I do not prioritize life on kill on chest over max minion life. Max minion life is king, and this is always going to be the best stat for any piece you see it on. But this is just a note to keep in mind. We are also playing around with a few ways to potentially keep the bone mages up, but seeing as they haven't been tested yet, I haven't included them in the guide. But one of these ways is to make use of Shielding Storm, which provides you a shield or barrier, I guess, when you use Bone Storm to damage enemies, including your Golem's Bone Storm. And then mixing that up with, I believe it's the Lion Hearts, which gives you life per second while you have an active barrier. The hope for this is that your minions who gain barriers, which is all of them, by the way, my phrasing might have been weird, but all your minions gain barrier. I'm hoping they inherit the life per second heals, so they actually do just have a baseline healing to keep them alive if you do forget this. So just I'm putting it out there, but it hasn't been tested, so it's not in the guide. But this guide is very subject to change because I'm still testing things out and I'm still changing things. So if you're ever confused as to what to do, just refer to the guide or message me on Discord. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have. With bone mages sustained out of the way, we then have to consider other parts of the build. Now we know it's a hands-on build. We understand why it's a hands-on build, and we see the steps that have been put in place to try to limit or to try to make it more laid back. Let's get on with the rest of the build. Now, What other minions are we using? We are using Reaper Skeletons with upgrade 2. So we have corpses, which makes it so we can maintain our priest buff up even during bosses, like when we just started boss encounter without killing ads, just to make it a lot more comfortable and make it so we do not need upgrade 2's corpse from them dying. We also go for Bone Golem because the taunt I find outperforms the other golems skills. The second consideration is Iron Golem, of course. Iron Golem is actually pretty good, especially with its vulnerable slam, but I find that I just prefer the Bone Golem taunt in general. For the aspects, we have reanimation, and on the two-handed, this was buffed, so we're going to be getting even higher values than we were before. And this is on the Codex of Power, so you actually do gain this early on. Now, the footage you are seeing on gameplay is not going to include any aspects except maybe Blood Getters and Viscous, and this is the only reason those aspects were in the test is because they were dropped, and even on being dropped, I didn't use them until I was much further into the leveling process to where I could potentially be farming aspects with obols. We go for Frenzied Dead on the amulet, so our minions have increased attack speed. We have to be careful with this one because it does mean bone mages die quicker, but in general, the damage output we get from this is just worth being on the amulet. An alternative to this would be putting Viscous, which is skeleton mage, on the amulet, giving us an extra bone mage, and that in and of itself is also a lot of DPS increase. So it's really your choice which you want to go. But keep in mind, if you go Viscous here, then you need to open up a slot for Frenzied Dead, and that would obviously most likely take the space of Conceited. So just keep that in mind. We are using Grasping Veins, so we have added critical strike chance and critical strike damage when we hit enemies with corpse tendrils, which we will be using quite often. We use Osseous Guild to extend our Bone Storm, which gives us more crit chance. And keep in mind, your minions get a third of your crit chance. So a combination of Bone Storm and Grasping would give your minions somewhere around 12% crit chance, which is still decent, albeit not the most mind-blowing when you think of the figure. But if you have 12 minions all at 12% higher crit strike chance, then at least one minion is gonna crit every single time all minions attack once. So it's something to keep in mind. We are going Shielding Storms for reasons I told you. You get a shield, it benefits Conceited. This is our only source of shields, this and maybe Aspect of the Protector. So if you prefer that, you can use it, but this has more uptime with the use of Bone Storm and Decapify. We use Disobedience, and Blood Getters is a no-brainer. Now for the skill tree, I will be adding a leveling path in the future when I come up with it, but for now there is no leveling path. Just when you come, look, keep an eye out for it. You might actually be viewing the guide after the leveling path has been updated, but it will be updated. Level 1 through 2, you can go Decompose. It's really your call. I like Decompose. You can go Bone Splinters. If you want to use minions, you could try to put 3 points into Reap so you can get a corpse. But I like Decompose personally. It's my go-to basic, but either way, you just put 2 points into a basic and you move on. Here we don't use any. Here you actually want to start off leveling with Bone Spear. So this leveling guide is going to be very important for you going into the season. So I will try to get it out as soon as I can. But you would want to, the TLDR is you would want to go Bone Storm and Corpse Explosion with Grim Harvest giving you Essence. And you take this all the way till roundabout you unlock Bone Mages at level 22. And once you unlock Bone Mages, you have a choice to make. That I think is still early to switch Bone Mages, unless you really like the hands-on experience. But the best time to switch to Bone Mages is when you finally get 3 points in Bonding in Essence, while you're in the level 20s. And with the extra skill points you get from your Renown, you should have this fully spec'd out by the time you unlock your Bone Mages. But all that would be in the leveling part when it is updated. But the build as is goes like this. We don't use any core skills. We use Corpse Tendrils to group enemies up so your minions have a spot to focus fire on, and you don't really have to worry about the clunkiness of minion AI doing things you don't want to do. You You don't want your minions to spread out, so they all attack one area. They do a lot of damage. If a minion attacks and that mob dies before the projectile gets there, you don't have to worry about the projectile being wasted because all the mobs are in one very packed area. So Corpse Tendril has a lot of benefits outside of Grasping Veins, and Grasping Veins is really just the icing on the cake. We currently have Iron Maiden spec'd into here because we're exploring using a gem to get Decapify aura, and with the free Decapify, it's opening a spot for Iron Maiden. But the problem with this is after testing, it looks like your Iron Maiden actually doesn't heal your minions. So odds are going to be swapping out of Iron Maiden for a different skill, like maybe Corpse Explosion or Bone Prison. This I haven't decided which yet, but we're going to be choosing a different skill to replace this. But this I will leave here just so I remember the idea I had. We use Kalan's Edict. Reasons we use Kalan's Edict and Shadow Blight is, one, we do not have any source of shadow damage with this build, so we can't even proc Shadow Blight. But aside the fact that we have no shadow damage, Kalan's is a really strong keystone if you can keep it up, but there are many ways you can force it to be up. For example, if you want to force Kalan's to be up, just using Blood Mist, which makes you immune for 3 seconds, forces it to come up. So you have the 3 seconds of your Blood Mist to figure out where you want to position yourself to where you're not going to take damage, to then extend the Kalan's Edict duration further. Aside these, everything is pretty self-explanatory for minions. You want Death's Defense to make sure they can't get one shot. You want Burning Essence to give them really big heals every 5 seconds of the priest buff running. You want Inspiring Leader so they have more attack speed, and you want Hellbent Commander so they have more damage while you are near them. You want all the mastery nodes. You want 45 because your Reapers are going to be 45 you almost permanently, where you would almost always have permanent 45 with this build. And Paragon wise, you will notice I haven't fully spec'd it out because this is a starter build. I don't want you to get confused, but I wanted to include this in the video. This is how I level through the starter board. Why do I level this way through the starter board? Because your best in slot board is Cult Leader, and you want to get all the points in here ASAP. Once you get the points listed in Cult Leader done, then you want to come back and get all the intelligence nodes in this region and then fill out the magics and everything. I will be updating it, but this I wanted to show in this video just so you understand that this is how you level up through the starter board. Now with the Paragon board out of the way, we can go on to gear pieces and what I believe are the most important affixes on each slot, so you understand what to look out for when you're leveling. Starting from the helmet, we really want life on kill. This is a really nice stat to have, maximum life. Lucky hit chance while you have barrier is only really necessary while you have men down, but just to make it so you can transition to a men down variant very easily, I have included this here, but you can just have percent armor in place of lucky hits while you are leveling. Any lucky hits you find on any stat is for if we do get men down, because we want to prepare for that eventuality, because we do want to spec into a men down. But at its core, we do not use lucky hits chance here. So if you do not care about dropping that ring, do not worry about lucky hit chance. On the chest piece, the most important stats are maximum minion life and life on kill. If you find a piece with these two stats, you want to keep it. Maximum minion life is, in my experience, a very low weighted stat, which means it's very hard to enchant onto gear. So I typically look for gear that has maximum minion life on it, and then I would put something else like summoning skill damage enchanted on it, or maximum life. But you ideally want max minion life and at least life on kill. Well, for the bone mages we discussed earlier. On gloves, we want critical strike chance that is 100% non-negotiable. We want dexterity for the critical strike chance we get from the stats. We want all stats because of more dexterity, more intelligence, just more damage. And just because they aren't really better stats, I think would be more useful on gloves for you at least. So maybe critical strike chance while injured, but I don't like waiting for any injured condition. Typically, that's just me. You can go for it if you wanted to. On your pants, max minion life is your best in slot stats, after which you can total armor becomes his next, and then DR becomes after that. Flat DR is probably going to be the least important, and I would say this can easily be replaced with like some other damage reduction that we can take advantage of, like damage reduction while injured. But again, I don't like waiting for conditions like injured, so I am very biased towards Fortify and just flat out damage reduction, because I feel like that being up all the time will give us more overall value than most other damage reduction stats we can have. Movement speed ranks on corpse tendrils to have tendrils up as much as possible, applying vulnerable as much as we can. We have movement speed because we're a very slow class. This is the most important stat. We do not want boots without movement speed unless some reason overrides this, like maybe it has an aspect you don't want to extract, things like that. Damage reduction while injured because there is no other damage reduction stat we want, and then dexterity for obvious reasons. On the amulet, we want Hellbent Commander. It's a really strong passive to have, and if you have this, you have a lot of extra damage. We ideally want movement speed. We want summoning skill damage. Minion attack speed is the flex pick here, and it can be replaced with damage reduction if you feel squishy, or whatever other stat you think you might want in its place. But attack speed is just pretty good in general. Grasping Veins on the ring. The ring, we want these stats on the ring: critical strike chance, maximum minion life, vuln damage, and crit damage. Max minion life being the most important, followed by critical strike chance, and then vulnerable and crit damage being runner-ups. But vulnerable being more important than crit, and the same for the second ring. And eventually, when we get Mendon, this is the ring it replaces. We are currently running the Great Feast, which, if you don't know what it does, is each minion drains 2 essence per second, but deals 75% increased damage. This combined with the Bone Mage should give you a shit ton of damage. Like, it's going to be so much, it's never going to be funny. But the caveat to this is we are going to have no essence, because we have the way it's worded anyways implies you're going to be losing 24 essence per second with 12 minions, which this build plans on having 12 minions. So losing 24 essence per second means we have to either A, have no cost whatsoever as a skill and not use essence, or B, which is the more likely one, we offset this cost with a different gem called Determination. What does Determination do? Determination reduces resource draining effects by 50%, and then it gives you increased resource generation, and this is supposed to scale. So my assumption is when we get to War Tier 4, Determination would give a whole lot more resource draining and a whole lot less resource drain and a whole lot more resource generation rather. So this should counteract the negative effects of the Great Feast. But we want to work off the assumption that it does not, and as such we are building free Decapify, which opens up this slot because Decapify is currently the only essence spender on this build. So if we can get a free Decapify, then we do not need essence. So with Decapify coming from this, we will be replacing Decapify on the bar with something else. And like I mentioned earlier, the initial theory was Iron Maiden, but Iron Maiden turns out to not heal minions. So I am looking into other alternatives, but expect a bone prison or an Iron Maiden in this slot, because both are free. And for the last gem, we go for the Barbara, which reads critical strikes and all subsequent damage within X amount of time is absorbed by your target. Then the absorbed damage erupts onto surrounding enemies. Stored damage is increased by 10% per second. Now, the way I read this is when a critical strike is hit on an enemy, they start absorbing all damage they take for a time. This stored damage then gets increased by 10% and then becomes an AoE that hits surrounding enemies, either on death or just after the time elapses. Now, my thought process in including this is your minions should be able to proc the critical strike damage absorption, which gives us basically free AoE in just our regular clear, which can then kind of like be a pseudo Mendon from when we do not have Mendon. Now, if your minions don't inherit this, we can still proc it with Bone Storm. So it doesn't really matter if minions inherit it or not, so long as their damage is counted and it says all subsequent damage within that time, which means all damage, not damage from you, not specific from anything, all damage, which means your minions damage do still benefit from it. So this is why we are adding this third gem. Now, keep in mind, I have also heard rumors that you can only use one Wrathful gem on your piece of gear. And if that is the case, an alternative I'm currently considering is the Picana, which makes it so critical strikes electrically charge enemies to do lightning damage on them. And I would assume minion critical strikes would also do the same effect. But even if they don't, like I said, Bone Storm still does it. But this is a nice option or a nice replacement to have in the eventuality that that is the case and we can't use two Wrathfuls. But for now, we're going under the assumption that you can. If I change it on the build guide, you know to change it. So in the end, just keep an eye out on the actual guide and you should be fine. Now, with all that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know how this build works out for you. If you enjoyed, if you think it's bad, I would like to know your opinions. It helps me improve the builds in the future. It helps me know what is sought after in builds, or what kind of playstyle people generally look for. And if you have any questions or you haven't been able to make it work and you think you would really like to make it work, feel free to message me on Discord. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have or to just help you with your general builds. That said, have a good rest of your day and see you next time.